Hey folks, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. I'm hanging out with this nerd today.
Nerdarchist Ted.
How to pick your 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons race.
Jump down in the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy the newsletter, get weekly gaming tips, as well as learn how to game with Nerdarchy.
Alright, so, we've done several of these videos. We started with character class, now we're going to talk about race. And, during these videos, there's a couple things, right? We're just going to ask some questions, and then by, what you fill out and those answer, how you answer those questions will kind of determine what race you want to go with for your D&D character. I think the main question.
Do you want to be human?
Human or not human? Yeah, that is the question. I know, different gamers, different groups that I've played with, they're either usually a player is like, I only play humans, or I don't ever play humans. So that's why it's really important to determine, what kind of player you are. And then with 5th edition D&D, they've added some other ones that are they're newer, and I feel like the old guard is kind of with tieflings and dragonborn. Oh my god, it was bad enough we had to deal with gnomes and halflings, and now you got dragon men and devil men in your game. This isn't my D&D.
All right, so whether you look at it from a story aspect or from a mechanical aspect, technically, all of us are human, therefore we know what it's like to be human, to some degree. Therefore, there are some people who aren't ready to, I'm already crossing the threshold into playing this fantasy game. I'm already accepting that magic exists and all these monsters exist. Now you want me to not be human as well? For some, that's a stretch. You've already asked too much. So they find it's easier to just stick with human and go with it. That may or may not be your reason for wanting to always play a human, but to some, that's what they got. That's what they're going with.
Yeah, you bring up a good and valid point. It can be hard to figure out how to live in someone else's skin, let alone a person that would be kind of alien to you, because elves and dwarves and some of the other races are very long-lived, so they have a different outlook. They interact with the environment differently. They have their own cultures that are very different than anything we'd be used to. So it is a lot harder to roleplay something like that. Where a human, like you said, we all kind of know what a human does and how a human is. So that's definitely an element. But if you want to, get out of your skin and try something different, playing a non-human could be a really good way to go. What are the races that we have in the player's handbook for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons? They're broken into two different categories. You have common races and you have uncommon races. For our common races, we have dwarf, elf, halfling, and human. Then we have uncommon races.
So we have the gnome, the half-elf, the half-orc, the tiefling, and the dragonborn.
Yeah, so, depending on, you can get half the human experience if you want to. But again, from the story element, it's just what do you feel like? What is your character going to do? But then the other way of looking at it is mechanics, right? What kind of character class are you planning on playing? So you might want to match up, and optimize your character class and your race. Some of the races are kind of iconic for certain character classes, like tiefling and warlock just go together. Dwarf and fighter or cleric go together really well. The elven wizard is a stereotype.
So is the gnome specifically to the illusionist?
Yes, especially if you go way back to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Matter of fact, that might have been the only kind of wizard they could be, and it was a magic user back then. It wasn't even a wizard. So if you look at the different races, they have different stat adjustments, right? And every character class kind of has certain stats that are going to be ideal for them. So if you're playing something that's charisma-based, you're going to want to look at one of the charisma-based races, like half-elf or human, which can basically use anything, or dragonborn. But if you're playing a strength-born race, you might want a half-orc because they're big and burly.
Or you might want a dwarf because not only, are they burly, but they can be hardy as well.
Right. And then there's also other things that you can get from your race choices as well that will kind of broaden your abilities, what you can do. So, for instance, a wizard typically doesn't wear armor and doesn't have armor proficiency. But if you were to pick up Mountain Dwarf, then you can wear medium armor, and you also get a couple weapon proficiencies as well, which could change things out.
So it really is going to come down to whether you're trying to pick your class first or whether you want to pick your race first. So sometimes the race first gives you an idea of where you could go, either with a very natural progression, dwarf into a warrior class or a cleric class, or whether you wanted to say, okay, well, I want to go against type and play, something that's off the wall, like I want to play a half-orc bard. They're not very charismatic naturally, but half-orc bards could be a lot of fun to play.
Yeah, there is a lot of choices there, and we haven't even gone out of the player's handbook yet, because there's other books like Volo's Guide to Monsters that introduce other races. The Sword Coast Adventure Guide offers up other subclasses that we can take advantage of. Half Elf and Tiefling in particular, from Sword Coast Adventure, gives you a bunch of variants, as well as Mordekainen's Tome of Foes gives you some more variants for Tiefling as well. So there's a lot of different ways to play these races, and it really just depends on what you want to do, what your approach is going to be when you're picking your race for your 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons character. I would take a look, and go, do I want to build up from the race out, or do I want to go build kind of backwards? Start with your character class and go, well, what race is going to make the best combination with this class, or the weirdest, right?
Right, yeah.
You could do that as well, as you mentioned with your bard half-orc. There's not many of those running around, and just because there isn't doesn't mean it wouldn't be fun to play.
So you've got the multiple options to look at, whether you're looking at, I want a very straightforward, or whether you want to go something that's much more unorthodox. And honestly, whichever way is more fun for you is the direction that you should be aiming towards.
So with that, like, how do you pick your character race when you're making a D&D character?
Well, for me, there are times that I decide I haven't played a dwarf in 5th edition yet, so I really want to play a dwarf. Well, when I look at the pieces of the puzzle, I say, all right, well, what's next? What haven't I played? There's other times I say, well, I want to play a bard because 5th edition really makes bards stand out much more so than the previous editions. So I can look at it from multiple perspectives. So when it comes to that, I want to play a dwarf, I said, all right, well, what is that dwarf going to be? Dwarves can be very religious. They can very much, care about the dwarven history. Well, there's that ancestor worship concept in the Path of the Ancients Barbarian. So I actually started playing around recently, and I made a dwarven barbarian going towards that Path of the Ancients, and he was going to be a little atypical for barbarians because the idea was for him to really want to be very spiritual and pay homage to to his adversaries as well as to his ancestors, that he literally can call to him once he gets those abilities. Going in the other direction.
How more spiritual than angry?
Well, it's kind of. And then along the same lines, going backwards, I was very much interested in playing a bard, and I kind of was like, all right, well, what kind of would work with being, very, very showy and very much, in the public eye. And I'm like, well, cats are kind of in people's face a lot. And there's the tabaxi in Volo's Guide. I'm like, a tabaxi bard could be a lot of fun, and I could really play up some of the, very cat angles of it. And since I'm a cat person, I kind of see what that's like in day-to-day life. So I kind of made two characters.
You want to play a character like sticks their butts in people's faces.
I'm not going to go that far, but the idea of, okay, well, we're not doing anything at the moment. So he's like, all right, I'm going to lounge out and I'm going to stretch and I'm going to take up more space than I really should. So looking at these concepts that are a lot of fun and very, typical for, what those races are.
I think you should play a tabaxi based off of the philosophy that cats are liquid.
Well, that could be a lot of fun. I do like that meme.
Yeah, one of the things that I was kind of thinking about when we're talking about doing this video is I don't think I've played an elf since my very first character back in a D&D.
That's amusing considering, my history where like 90% of my second edition characters were elves.
I know I've played a handful, I've played a handful of dwarves and all the other races, but I had not played an elf in forever. I'm like, maybe I should play an elf. I mean, it's not my spirit D&D race. Dwarf really speaks to me, and some of the other ones. And that's, that is also like kind of goes along with how to pick your character race for D&D is like, what do you like? Like, what do you feel like? What speaks to you? Like, maybe you only ever play dwarves or gnomes or whatever it is you play. It doesn't matter. It's your character. If it's fun for you, go for it. Or maybe you're like what Ted says, like, oh, I haven't played this yet. That's what I want to play. I do the same thing sometimes as well. So there's tons of ways to come up with how you want to pick your race. But the question is, how are you guys picking your race? We have a place where we can discuss and talk about that, and that is down in the comments below. While you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
You can head over to the Nerdarchy store and check out some sweet products over there.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.